way to start than to try and hunt out the very first child who read the opening manuscript of The Hobbit. And that's a man called Rayner Unwin.
Bilbo Baggins was a hobbit who lived in his hobbit hole and never went on adventures. At last, Gandalf the wizard and his dwarves persuaded him to go. He had a very exciting time, fighting goblins and dwarves. At last they got to the Lonely Mountain. Smaug, the dragon who guards it, is killed, and after a terrific battle with the goblins, he returned home rich. This book should appeal to all children between the ages of 5 and 9.
Hello, Ren. Nice to see you again.
Very good to see you, Rick.
So you're to blame for all of this, then, with your review?
Well, I suppose that's right. I was 10 years old, and it's not a very good review, but it worked.
Get paid?
Yes, a shilling.
Did that affect your review in any way, manner, fashion, or
Oh,
form?
I don't think so. No, I was doing quite a lot of these odd children's book reviews for my father, who was a publisher, and I enjoyed doing them.
I desperately wanted to write music to some of Tolkien's work, but he made it so difficult. I, in fact, thought it was going to be incredibly easy because he was so wonderfully descriptive. But the problem was, for me, he was too descriptive, and he left almost no areas where I could, sort of cheat myself, because his imagination was so marvellous. He was obviously heavily affected by everything around him in this area here.
When he came here first, at the turn of the century, he was born in South Africa, and he and his younger brother and his mother came here to live after his father died in about 1900, and he spent 4 or 5 years.
So Sirhole was Hobbiton?
The whole area around here, which was unspoiled countryside, not part of Birmingham, was the Shire, undoubtedly the beginnings of the Shire, and Sirhole particularly was a very important place nearby.
Really? Well, let's do something that, as a young boy, he couldn't do. Let's actually go in legally.
Let's do that.
Wow, this is just like walking into one of Tolkien's drawings.
Yes, it's certainly head-cracking beams. Hobbits more than humans, I think.
Yes, not made for us. Places like this have really inspired his wonderful imagination.
This certainly looks like the picture of Bjorn's Hall in The Hobbit, doesn't it? Yes.
Although he wouldn't have been in here, would he?
No, as a child, he was quite a small boy. He must have been at the gate at most, pressing his nose against the fence perhaps, and very scared of the 2 millers, father and son, who ran the mill at the time. It was a bone mill. Didn't grind corn at the time, and that must have been even more frightening.
Very scary.
And the younger miller, who was covered in white dust, of course, was known as the White Ogre, and I should think he probably scared the kids quite a lot.
Well, in no way trying to equate myself with the genius of that man. I can relate to his search and his quest. I live on the Isle of Man, and there's a very similar thing there. It's the mythology and the legends and the small creatures that many people believe in, the folklore lives there. It's wonderful to search out.
He said when he was small, looking back, I desired dragons. And he would have been terrified of dragons because he wasn't a very brave person, but he wanted so many things.
And the theme of quests, of course, goes throughout the books, from start to finish. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead, the road has gone, and I must follow, if I can, pursuing it with eager feet until it joins some larger way where many paths and errands meet, and whither then, I cannot say. Well, we've come to the cloisters at Birmingham Oratory, which was in fact founded by Cardinal Newman 150 years ago, albeit minus the wonderful Birmingham traffic. And this was like a spiritual home for them, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. It was very important. Tolkien's mother had converted to the Catholic faith at the turn of the century, but when she herself died, when Tolkien was only 12 years old, she left the spiritual charge of the 2 boys to Father Francis Morgan of this oratory, and he was appointed to be the guardian. Father Morgan was a good man, but not intellectually very clever, but kind, loud, jolly, and I think must have been a marvellous influence on the two young boys.
I think I'm right in saying that the cloisters here where Tolkien would have spent so much time, well, in fact, at that time, the church wasn't in fact built, was it?
Yes, I think the church itself was being built while Tolkien was here, and so the cloisters and the oratory itself would be as he remembered them.
So it was thanks to Father Morgan and the other oratory fathers that he was allowed to continue his exploration of the idyllic settings of the wonderful countryside around here. So, the Lickey Hills.
Yes, this is where Tolkien and his mother and younger brother came for a long summer holiday. Just down there, the oratory fathers had a house which they lent for one summer when Tolkien was 12 to his mother and two children, and they had a blissful, perhaps the last innocent holiday that he had as a child, because that winter his mother died, and after that he became an institutionalized child, inevitably in the city. I think that it was a very precious memory, this long summer, scampering over the hills, picking bilberries and climbing trees.
I'm told that Birmingham has more trees than people. Believe that?
Well, it's got plenty of both, certainly.
Actually, to take one of your phrases, if I may, which is marvellous, you actually are quoted as saying that Tolkien was green before his time.
He loved living things. And
trees especially.
Trees especially, plants. He was a great botanist too, in an amateur way.
I can really relate to that. I've actually just planted 120 trees myself, would you believe? Well, not physically. I've got my gardener to do it. But
he would have loved you for that. He loved trees all his life. He would sometimes pat them. He would look on them as very much living creatures, in the way that some people look on a dog or a cat as a pet. I mean, trees to him were just as alive.
Well, remember the Ents?
Indeed, the Ents were, of course, in many ways the most important characters in The Lord of the Rings, and quite the chanciest, because they were the tree shepherds,
yes.
And they were probably amongst the oldest of living things.
And I'd love to believe that maybe some of these trees around here inspired some of that, even at that young age of 12. We are tree herds, we old Ents. Sheep get like shepherd, and shepherds like sheep, it is said. But it is quicker and closer with trees and Ents. Some of my kin look just like trees now and need something great to rouse them, and they speak only in whispers. But some of my trees are limb-lithe, and many can talk to me. Elves began it, of course, waking trees up and teaching them to speak and learning their tree talk. They always wished to talk to everything, the old elves did. But then the great darkness came, and they passed away over the sea, or fled into far valleys and hid themselves, and made songs about days that would never come again, never again. Aye, aye, there was all one wood once upon a time, from here to the mountains of Loon. Time was when I could walk and sing all day and hear no more than the echo of my own voice in the hollow hills, and the smell of the air. I used to spend a week just breathing. I suppose this is where he would have come kite flying with Father Morgan, is it not?
Yes, Bilberry Hill is a good hill for kites, I should think.
Probably still is today.
I should think it would be.
So, got a marvellous view over here. A Jekyll and Hyde view, in fact, with the Austin Motor Works, nicely covered by Birmingham over the back there.
A bit of Mordor, really, the evil empire of industrial technology, which he hated. But on the other hand, over here...
That's what he would have liked.
He would have loved it still. I imagine that is the Shire.
Absolutely.
The West Midlands,
yes.
which he loved.
He was a real green, wasn't he?
Oh, yes. And he loved this particular bit of countryside beyond all others.
Yes. So he was quite an expert, wasn't he, on the West Midlands dialect?
He was particularly fond of the West Midlands dialect, but of course it's only one dialect in the Anglo-Saxon studies and indeed linguistic studies that he specialised in all his life.
How many languages does he actually speak?
Oh, umpteen. And he had a great knowledge of probably all the northern Western European languages and probably a working knowledge of all Western European languages. He loved and concentrated mostly on the northern languages, Old Norse, Icelandic, Finnish, as well as Anglo-Saxon.
Almost, some people might say they were dead languages. Would that be unkind?
Not for him. They were the living languages. The dead ones were probably the Romance languages.
Of course, he invented his own languages, didn't he?
Oh, yes. He invented two fairly full-blown Elvish languages, based a little on Welsh and a little on Finnish. And, of course, he adapted runic writing so that he had his own scripts. He invented his languages and then filled the world that the languages had to inhabit with history.
So the languages came first?
The languages came first. He was a linguist first and a writer of fiction, if you like, second.
And so I suppose whatever depths you want to involve yourself in Tolkien's wonderful world of mythology, it all stems from this wonderful landscape that we see around us here.
Certainly the roots are here.
The road goes ever on and on, out from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, let others follow it who can. Let them a journey new begin, but I at last, with weary feet, will turn towards the lighted inn. My evening rest had sleep to meet.
Lovely. Well, actually, we've just had a producer ring in and say, would you do a Jackanory for us? You obviously...